In unserem Interview vergangene Woche lag der Schwerpunkt auf dem Angriff Israels auf das iranische Konsulat in Damaskus und auf die ausstehende Vergeltung durch den Iran. Heute, eine Woche später, wartet die Welt noch immer darauf. Warum zögert der Iran? Welches Zeichen sendet er damit an den Rest der Welt? Und welche Rolle spielen dabei die Drohungen Israels, die iranischen Nuklearanlagen anzugreifen?
First of all, I don't think Iran's hesitating. I think we have to respect the fact that Iran is a Islamic republic, a deeply religious Islamic republic, respects the sanctity of the Ramadan holiday. Today is Eid Fitr, the end of Ramadan. And I would imagine that this time next week, we'll be having a completely different discussion about Iran's so-called hesitation. Iran has made it clear that it will retaliate. And indeed, if the notion of Iranian deterrence is to have any value, it must retaliate. Israel must understand that if it strikes Iran's nuclear facilities, that the Dimona nuclear facility will be eliminated from the face of the earth. And this could lead to a nuclear catastrophe in Israel, a widespread contamination, etc. I don't think that Iran's in the business of blinking, hesitating, or showing weakness. I think that, Iran will do what Iran will do. And I think we may find out what Iran will do sooner rather than later.
Lass uns das einmal hypothetisch durchspielen. Wenn du noch beim US-Militär für die Analyse des Gefahrenpotenzials zuständig wärst, an welchen Stellen würdest du mit einem Angriff des Iran rechnen? Und wie würdest du darauf reagieren? Hätten die US-Basen in der Region überhaupt eine realistische Verteidigungschance, sollte der Iran sie angreifen?
The quality and quantity of Iranian ballistic missiles are such that they will be able to strike a large number of targets using weapons that cannot be intercepted, meaning that any target they choose to hit will be hit. They proved this point when they struck the Al-Assad air base in the aftermath of the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. They have even more advanced weapons than the ones that they used against Al-Assad. There is no air defense system deployed in the region capable of shooting down Iran's missiles. So if Iran decides to strike a target, that target will be hit and that target will suffer extensive damage. The question, therefore, isn't does Iran have the capacity to launch attacks? It's will Iran use this capacity to its full extent? Iran will make a demonstration of its resolve, and this demonstration will have an impact. There needs to be punishment of Israel. The question is, will Iran strike targets inside Israel, or will Iran strike targets that are valuable to Israel but outside Israel? Iran has several options, one of which is to strike Israeli military facilities in the Golan Heights, where Iran could do extensive damage to these facilities and yet not be accused of crossing the so-called red line of striking Israel proper. But Iran has also indicated in the past that if Iran is attacked by Israel, then Iran will destroy Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Israeli military bases. And Iran has the capacity to do that. I think it should be clear that Iran has greater capacity to strike Israel than Israel has capacity to strike Iran, especially in a non-nuclear capacity. Iran has thousands of ballistic missiles. For Israel, they have scores of missiles capable of hitting Iran, these Jericho missiles. They also have aircraft, but it's a very difficult proposition to have aircraft fly to Iran, bomb a target, and fly back. And so any exchange of offensive strike capability will be to the advantage of Iran. Iran can absorb far more damage from Israel than Israel can absorb from Iran. If Iran takes out Israeli air bases, that will limit Israel's potential to strike Iran. And Israel's command and control and government facilities are in a well-defined area. Iran is fully capable of taking these these locations out. So I don't think Israel's threat worries too many people in Iran. They have spent a lot of time preparing for this. Israel can't be prepared for this because of the size of the country. And so I have a feeling that while Israel right now is talking a big show, that if when push comes to shove, unless Iran carries out a massive strike against Israel, Israel's threats about striking Iran are empty threats.
Der israelische Angriff auf das iranische Konsulat in Damaskus scheint Schule zu machen. Vergangene Woche stürmten ecuadorianische Polizeikräfte die mexikanische Botschaft in Quito, um den ehemaligen Vizepräsidenten Jorge Glas zu inhaftieren, der sich in der Botschaft aufhielt und von Mexiko Asyl gewährt bekommen hatte. In Lateinamerika schlug das Vorgehen Ecuadors hohe Wellen. Neben Mexiko hat auch Nicaragua die diplomatischen Beziehungen zu Ecuador abgebrochen. Weitere Nationen prüfen ähnliche Schritte. Ist global ein Damm gebrochen, dass internationale Spielregeln wie etwa das Wiener Übereinkommen zum Schutz der diplomatischen Vertretungen nicht mehr bindend sind? Und wie wirkt sich das auf die vom Westen so hochgepriesene regelbasierte Weltordnung aus?
Well, first of all, I think we need to distinguish up front the difference between the rules-based international order, which has nothing to do with international law and everything to do with behavioral patterns imposed on the world by the United States, oftentimes in violation of international law. This is why Russia and China, when they came together in February of 2022, on the eve of the Beijing Winter Olympics, in their 5,000-word joint statement, talked about creating a counter to the rules-based international order, which would be premised on a law-based international order. And so I don't think there's any linkage between the deterioration or the ineffectiveness of the rules-based international order and what's taking place right now, this pattern of behavior in violation of international law. I think it's a disregard around the world about the rule of law. When you have Israel violating international law on a daily basis and getting away with it, when you have the United States in advocating the rules-based international order, together with its allies, NATO, the European Union, violating international law on a daily basis, what do we expect the rest of the world to do? When you have disregard for the law, don't be surprised when others act out in a similar manner. And so that's what I think is happening until the world becomes serious about enforcing international law. Israel has been accused of genocide before the International Court of Justice, and the International Court of Justice has set down demands for Israel regarding the genocidal behavior of its government and its soldiers, and Israel ignores this, and there are no consequences for Israel ignoring this. What do you then, when Ecuador says, hey, we'd like to capture this guy, but that'll be a violation of international law? What does international law mean anymore? It's meaningless. International law is used as a political weapon. They accuse Russian President Vladimir Putin of kidnapping children, a ludicrous charge, but they had the International Criminal Court file a warrant for his arrest. Total politicization of the rule of law. So what do you expect to happen? I think unless the world becomes serious about enforcing its laws and not allowing its laws to be politicized, I think we're going to see more and more nations say it's not convenient for us to follow international law any longer.
Nach dem Terroranschlag auf die Crocus City Hall in Moskau verfolgen die russischen Ermittlungsbehörden eine Spur zum ukrainischen Öl- und Gaskonglomerat Burisma Holdings. Diese ist dafür bekannt, dass sie nach dem Maidan-Putschjahr 2014 Hunter Biden, den Sohn von US-Präsident Joe Biden, einstellte. Damit nähren sich Spekulationen über eine mögliche US-Beteiligung an diesem und weiteren Terroranschlägen gegen Russland. Washington bemühte sich, diese zügig von sich zu weisen. So betonte der nationale Sicherheitsberater Jack Sullivan, das alles sei Unsinn. Russland wisse genau, dass allein der Islamische Staat hinter den Anschlägen stecke. Wie schätzt du das ein? Gibt es eine Verbindung zwischen Washington und dem Terroranschlag? Welche Rolle spielt dabei die Burisma Holdings?
I'll start off by saying that the Russians are very careful with words, generally speaking, and very careful with facts. Russia, like any nation, is fully capable of spinning a story to its advantage. They are fully capable of placing undue emphasis on facts that may not warrant that emphasis. If Russia says there is connection between Burisma holding and the funding that supported the terrorists, that means there is evidence to that extent. And so I have no problem believing that Burisma holding, which we know is a criminal enterprise. We know this because they launder money. They laundered money to the Biden family through Hunter Biden. We know this. There's no doubting this. But the relationship between Burisma and the Bidens has long since been terminated. Hunter Biden no longer receives his bribe, and that his bribe no longer flows to the big man in terms of 10%. So the concept that Joe Biden and the Biden administration is somehow involved in the Crocus City Hall attack through the Burisma connection, I believe is not sustainable at this point in time. I think Russia is put out there for political purposes, because what they said is we have a link to Burisma, and Burisma was linked to the Bidens, leaving therefore the implication that Biden is linked to Crocus. I don't believe Biden is linked to Crocus through Burisma. I do believe that Burisma is a criminal enterprise that has been used by Ukrainian intelligence to launder money and to flow money. If you don't want money going straight from the Ukrainian government, you use a middleman. And Burisma Holdings, because it is this corrupt entity, is a viable candidate for such a purpose. So if Russia says they have the evidence, I believe Russia does have the evidence, and there it is. The concept that ISIS, that Russia knows ISIS did itself. Well, I mean, gee, America, you sort of condemn yourself, because I think there's plenty of evidence that shows the United States helped facilitate the creation of ISIS, that the United States armed ISIS, the United States trained ISIS, the United States provided funding to ISIS. So the United States directly implicates itself by saying, oh, it was only ISIS. No, it's a little bit more complicated than that. There's a lot more nuance involved. ISIS has been used by the United States and others as a front organization. For instance, we helped facilitate the growth of ISIS and helped encourage their operations when we were using ISIS as a vehicle to take down the Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And we continue to use ISIS as a front in our ongoing struggle against other entities in the Middle East. So the United States is, once again, not telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help them God, when it comes to the real state of affairs. The ISIS link to this attack was always meant to be a front. It was meant to be the creation of added deniability into this attack. The Russians have pierced this veil of subterfuge and have found a direct connection with Ukraine that the United States finds to be inconvenient.
Lass uns über den Islamischen Staat sprechen. Es gibt Stimmen, die spekulieren, warum er genau jetzt wieder in Erscheinung getreten sein soll. Der Zeitpunkt verblüfft. Nach einer Zeit der hohen Aktivität zwischen 2014 und 2019 war der Islamische Staat während der Corona-Pandemie quasi nicht präsent in Europa. Und auch seit der Eskalation der Ukraine-Krise 2022 ist er nicht in Erscheinung getreten in Europa. Nun plötzlich soll er wieder da sein und just genau Moskau angreifen, eine Woche nach den russischen Präsidentschaftswahlen. Ist der Islamische Staat überhaupt noch existent als autarke Organisation im Nahen Osten? Oder folgt er längst Drehbüchern aus Washington bzw. Langley in Virginia, wo die CIA ihren Sitz hat?
I think the Islamic State is a standalone entity created on its own volition. When we talk about American involvement, it wasn't that America conceived the Islamic State. America has exploited the existence of the Islamic State. Once the Islamic State, came into being as an offshoot of Al-Qaeda Iraq, that happened without the United States. We didn't say this is what we want. What the United States did is said, oh, look, there's something in Syria called the Islamic State that we believe could be useful in bringing down Bashar al-Assad. So we will, A, not attack them, and B, allow them to do things that otherwise we would seek to interdict. So C, they can become more effective in their to destabilize Bashar al-Assad. And so we became sort of indirect interlocutors with the Islamic State, providing, for instance, training to personnel that we knew would be selling weapons to the Islamic State, or not stopping them from selling weapons or transferring personnel to the Islamic State. But the Islamic State is fully capable of carrying out its own operations on its own that are designed to fulfill their goals and objectives, not the United States. We simply use the Islamic State, for our policy objectives. And the same thing holds for Islamic State in Khorasan in Afghanistan. They were created on their own volition. We didn't create them, but we oftentimes use them to put pressure on the Taliban. As we were trying to negotiate a better ending to Afghanistan than the one we eventually got, we would not attack ISIS in order to allow them to put pressure on the Taliban. And when you have these things, what it does is it injects in the mindset of those people responsible for the development of covert policy for the United States the idea that ISIS is a tool to be used. And here's the important thing about ISIS. A large part of their modus operandi is the self-initiating ISIS action. What I mean is, rather than being planned by the ISIS headquarters, ISIS allows people to declare their allegiance to ISIS, carry out an action, and then after the fact, ISIS will take credit for it. So imagine if you're the Ukrainian intelligence or the United States planning an attack against Russia. You create the attack in a way that it looks and smells like ISIS. It has Tajik Muslims who give shahada on video, who declare themselves to be affiliated with ISIS. Maybe they train with the ISIS entities. We lead them to ISIS entities to receive training. Those people training them believe they're training a genuine ISIS cell, but it's really a cell being created by the CIA, by Ukrainian intelligence to carry out an action. They self-declare as ISIS, and then ISIS says, we take credit for this after the fact. But the whole concept, everything they conceived and did, had nothing to do with ISIS and had everything to do with directives being given by the Ukrainian intelligence on behalf of the United States. That's what happened. And the United States knows what happened. We know we did this. We know we empowered the Ukrainians to do this. Victoria Nuland spoke with a smirk on her face about nasty surprises. This was a nasty surprise. The United States is trying to hide it, by pretending that it's ISIS, but the Russians are very good at forensic investigations. They've already cracked through the ISIS lie to expose the Ukrainian involvement. And I think sooner or later, they will crack through that and find the hidden hand of the CIA.
Die USA wollen gemeinsam mit Japan im UN-Sicherheitsrat ein Abkommen durchsetzen, das es allen Vertragsstaaten untersagt, Atomwaffen herzustellen, die im Weltall stationiert werden können. Der Sprecher des Nationalen Sicherheitsrates der USA, John Kirby, forderte Russland auf, sich dem Votum anzuschließen, da der russische Präsident Wladimir Putin selbst ausgesprochen habe, sein Land werde keine Atomwaffen im Weltall stationieren. Russland hingegen sieht das US-Vorhaben als Versuch an, russisch-chinesische Fortschritte in der Raketentechnologie auszubremsen. Die Sprecherin des russischen Außenministeriums, Maria Sacharowa, betonte, Washington verfolge selbst das Ziel, den Weltraum zu militarisieren. Wie bewertest du das? Welches Ziel verfolgen die USA mit dem angestrebten Sperrvertrag? Warum weigert sich Russland, sich diesem Vorhaben anzuschließen?
There's no doubt that the United States is not only pursuing the militarization of space, but has already militarized space. When we take a look at how the United States operates, or even how NATO operates, let's give an example. We have the French, who are talking about deploying a brigade to Ukraine. How does this brigade communicate? They have a system of communications amongst each other that is satellite dependent. That satellite facilitates the communication of combat units, the flow of intelligence, the flow of command and control. Every aspect of this brigade deployed forward is dependent upon a satellite network. The same thing holds for the United States. We are in the process of using SpaceX Falcon 9 to deploy a constellation of satellites that will give the United States what we call full spectrum dominance of a military area. Instant targeting information can be shared from intelligence collectors to weapons systems, artillery systems, missile systems, aircraft, all satellite based. And then we are deploying satellites to protect those satellites from anti-satellite weapons. So we are creating this invulnerable screen of satellite technology over the globe. And the Russians are saying, well, that's called militarization of space. You're already doing it. Now, how can Russia make this all go away? By employing an EMP type weapon, electromagnetic pulse weapon in space. One EMP weapon that goes off instantly blinds the United States and NATO. All the things we think we can do, all the things we're training to do. Remember, we train based upon perfect connectivity, perfect communications, perfect intelligence. So now we go to war and boom, blam, it's all gone. We're blind. We're back to being dumb. But we haven't trained for being dumb, so we die. This is the greatest fear of the United States. This is why the United States, together with Japan, is trying to move forward with this new treaty that bans something that's already banned. But you see, the Outer Space Treaty that bans the deployment of nuclear weapons also prohibits the militarization of space. It's the United States that is in violation of the Outer Space Treaty, which is why the United States isn't talking about the enforcement of an existing treaty, but the creation of a new treaty vehicle that only prohibits nuclear weapons in space. And this is why Russia won't sign on to that. Russia is not going to legitimize what the United States has done. Russia has said, we don't have a nuclear weapon. We're not planning on it. But I guarantee you that Russia has a concept that says if we are engaged in an existential struggle against the United States, where the United States seeks to take advantage of a superiority in satellite technology, that we have a plan to eliminate that satellite technology. And so I think Russia has every right to say, no, we're not going to play until you guys talk about what you're going to do about what you've already done in terms of the militarization of space. We're not going to sign a treaty that gives you unilateral advantage. So, that's the reality of the situation. The United States is scared to death because it has poured in hundreds of billions of dollars into the satellite architecture, and every aspect of our military operational model depends upon the connectivity provided by these satellites. And if Russia could take them out with one giant EMP, then that's wasted money. And it means that everything we're trying to do as a nation in terms of defense is no longer viable. And the same holds for Europe, for the French, for the Germans, for everybody. Lights go out and they don't know how to fight in the dark.
Kannst du bitte ins Detail gehen? Welchen militärischen Vorteil würde eine Stationierung von Atomwaffen im Weltall bieten? Verfügen die USA, Russland und China über die nötige Technologie dafür? Was bräuchte es genau dafür? Satelliten, Raketen, Abschussvorrichtungen?
Everybody who has a space launch capacity has a theoretical anti-satellite EMP capability. Just put a nuclear warhead on a missile, fire it into space, and have it detonate in outer space. Now, I would imagine that what the Russians have done is develop something that isn't as crude as that is more geared towards maximizing electromagnetic pulse and less geared toward generating a powerful nuclear blast. But we all have that capability. Any nuclear power with a space launch capability has the ability to take out satellites. Normally, you wouldn't have to focus on EMP because, in the past, for instance, U.S. reconnaissance satellites were giant school bus sized devices that were launched into space, and Russia would just develop a conventional warhead attached to an anti-ballistic, an anti-satellite weapon that could be fired from a MiG-31, or they can fire their own satellites that would then track down the big satellite and blow it up. But when you're talking about deploying these constellations of small satellites that communicate with one another, it's not as efficient, because now, for example, if they sent up conventionally armed satellites to take out one or two or three or four of these, the way the system's designed is that they're a Falcon 9 delivery vehicle waiting in the wings can just be loaded up with more satellites who are sitting in a warehouse, and they can be launched and replace the constellation. So theoretically, you can get the constellation back up and running within 24, 36 hours. But if you take out the entire constellation with an EMP weapon, you can't replace the entire constellation overnight. And so, this is what the United States fears, is that Russia, China, even North Korea now would launch a satellite killing weapon into space that would take out our ability to do anything, because we have allowed ourselves to become 100% dependent upon the technology of the satellites. And if they are eliminated, we can't do anything. We don't train the way I used to train, which is called stupid, meaning that we don't have satellite connectivity. We run wires down. We talk on radios. I send runners using a yellow canary to send a report in. It slows things down, but it's able to be done in an environment where you have no satellite connectivity. We don't train like that anymore. Everything is information driven, technology driven, and we need the satellites to be pushing this data. And if you eliminate the satellites, we can't push the data. If you can't push the data, we can't fight the war.
Hat der von den USA vorgebrachte Vorschlag, um Atomwaffen im Weltall zu verbieten, möglicherweise noch einen anderen Aspekt? Wollen die USA mit dem angestrebten Sperrvertrag möglicherweise Russland und China ausbremsen, weil die beiden Länder in der Raketenentwicklung die Nase vorn haben? Wie groß ist die Lücke in Sachen Raketenentwicklung und Weltraumtechnologie? Und können private US-Unternehmen wie SpaceX von Elon Musk oder Blue Origin von Jeff Bezos diese Lücke füllen?
I mean, I don't want to disparage SpaceX. They've got a very impressive, launch record. And they're a proven, reliable launch platform. But that is not. They're not. They're in the business of commercial satellite launches. They're not in the business of military launches in terms of deploying weapons. A weapon needs to be something that can be stored for a long time, over time, with rapid response capability, etc. And in this, the United States is lagging. Our Minuteman III missile is an old, aging system that has rapidly exceeded its life expectancy. It needs to be replaced. The United States is preparing something called the ground-based, I don't know, a GLBM or something of this nature, but it's a replacement. It's going to cost hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars, and it won't work properly because it's an American design system, which means that we don't design it to do, one thing right. We design it to do many things wrong. The same with our bomber, the same with our submarine systems. It's going to cost trillions of dollars to replace this. Russia, while we were spending 2 decades focused on fighting terrorism in the Middle East and around the world, Russia was focused on building up and modernizing its missile systems so that it could overcome American ballistic missile defense. I would ask your audience just to reflect on, what really was happening in Poland and Romania when the United States deployed the Aegis Ashore Mark 41 system. Europe bought into the lie that it was about Iran. It's not about Iran. It's about Russia. You bought into the lie that it wasn't ever going to be used to deploy ground-based systems, and yet the United States was always preparing for it to be deployed. Did Romania and Poland know that the United States was lying to everybody at the time? I don't know. That's a fair question to ask. But the United States hasn't been honest about any aspect of its weapons development. Russia has been upfront why they were developing and what they have developed. Russia is so far ahead of the United States in terms of ballistic missile capability today that the United States can't catch up. But I don't think this treaty is about resolving that. This is purely about preventing Russia from developing the capability of denying the United States the supremacy that it's seeking by deploying satellites in a militarized fashion into outer space.